Yo, Joe! All right, here we go. Laser Brains. We're here to review another cartoon from the 80s. I'm your co-host, Michael, and as always, I'm joined by...
Joshua Mervell, and as you can tell, we're going to be talking about G.I.Joe, the movie today.
That's right. And we're...
Yeah.
We're joined by Champion. Woo!
Yeah.
Yes.
I love when people look at me and laugh.
I know. It's a good thing. It's a good thing. And guess what? This is a very special episode. Long-time guest, first time...
Well, first time guest.
You got one too?
Long time
viewer,
first time guest.
caller.
That's right. TJ, thank you for joining us.
Hey, not a problem, guys. Anytime.
Awesome. Hey, by the way, I didn't realize up until now, TJ is not your full name. T and J stand for something.
Yes, they do.
What do they stand for?
Which story do you want to hear?
Oh, shit. Okay. I thought we were going to talk about G.I. Joe, but just tell us the quick one.
Tiberius Jackson, Tyrannosaurus Johnson.
Which one's real?
Neither.
Okay. We're going to leave it at that.
Yeah.
Okay. So before I don't know, guys. I kind of think that we should see TJ's toy supply before we even talk about the movie. What do you guys think? You cool with that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because TJ, to celebrate us talking about G.I. Joe, he has brought some of his childhood toys with us.
He brought his He-Man collection.
Yeah. To adorn.
I could have. Don't tease that.
Here,
We'll do that for another episode.
I'll hold your microphone here.
So we got in-card leather neck here.
Nice.
So I don't know. It's,
you can. Yeah. That's the
We'll
camera.
do
Yeah,
that.
there you go. Nice. So that's
this
is that a reissue?
This is a re-release. These
Okay.
are reissues. All my OG stuff has been very much played with as a child.
Okay.
We got Sergeant Slaughter there.
Oh, how appropriate.
That's
Nice.
just classic. And then you can't do a G.I. Joe anything without one of the vehicles, so we just got a classic Hiss tank.
Is that's an original?
No, it's not.
Okay.
It is. This is a re-release, and then inside we do have a O-ring Baroness.
Nice. Very nice. Okay. So before we even talk about the movie, we're going to talk about how we got into G.I. Joe, or if we were into G.I. Joe. Okay. So I was born in 1976, and I think... so I must have come in year 2 because my first G.I. Joe, I think, was Torpedo. I think. Okay?
Yep.
Okay.
I'm with you.
Yeah, but I also remember early days getting Short Fuse, getting obviously Snake Eyes, and over the years, I've had many G.I. Joe figures, but I do have every single figure from year 1.
Really?
Yes. Except for Grand Slam with the red pads, but I have every other one, and I have a whole bunch after that. I watched the show every day when it was on. I have every issue of the comic book. It was it's actually my favorite mainstream comic of the 80s. I've interviewed the creator, Larry Hama. Mm-hmm. He's one of my favorite writers. Like, I love him. We should point out quickly, G.I. Joe at one point was the best-selling comic by any company. It was outselling even X-Men in the mid-80s.
Wow.
So this is a phenomenon. We'll talk more about the phenomenon later, but I'm going to go in order of age, and I believe, Ian, you're next in line.
Yes,
but you did not get into G.I. Joe when you were a little kid, right?
Not really. I mean, I was aware of it. I had some G.I. Joes that were given to me by family members for Christmas who assumed that since I was a kid, I must like G.I. Joe because it's the hot thing.
Sure.
And I enjoyed them, and I played with them, and I snapped them in half and saw that they were held together by a little elastic band.
Yes.
and fun stuff. I was a little envious of my brother. I think he was more into G.I. Joe than I was because he got the hovercraft for Christmas one year.
Gotcha.
And I didn't really know it from the cartoon, but I thought it was pretty sweet. But beyond that, I got not really more into G.I. Joe, but more aware of it a little bit later in life, like early high school, just because it was on when I was getting ready for school.
Gotcha, yes.
So I just watch it instead of doing what I should have been doing.
Gotcha,
But beyond that, I was aware of it and I enjoyed it, but it wasn't really a core memory sort of thing for me.
Okay. TJ, we'll leave you for last, okay? Because
not a problem.
Best for
you're
last.
the youngest.
Yeah. Josh, tell us.
I know.
Any experience with G.I. Joe?
So I was born in 95.
Ooh, okay, so no.
So my first experience with G.I. Joe would be probably like
2 hours ago.
late March 2025.
Okay.
No, that's not true. I saw the live action movies.
Okay.
Unfortunately,
Do
the
those
first one.
count?
don't know.
In terms of
them.
what we're talking about, I don't know if
It didn't
they
help
do.
watching this movie.
No, I really hated them deeply.
And I've seen the PSAs.
Okay, like the parody versions.
Both.
Okay, gotcha.
Both.
Okay.
And I'm sure at some point I've probably seen an episode
Okay.
just like through osmosis, but no, nothing. I've got like
Okay.
no G.I. Joe knowledge. To be
Okay.
honest, I just watched the movie. I know Duke is in it.
Okay.
I know Sergeant Slaughter.
You know,
and
the Duke's,
Falcon.
you know the Duke's okay at the end?
Yeah, thankfully he woke up from his coma.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Duke's gonna be okay.
No,
All
I
right.
don't know much.
Okay, no problem.
Yeah.
But guess what? We have a G.I. Joe expert on our panel. TJ, what's your experience with G.I. Joe?
Well, I wouldn't call myself so much an expert per se, but I'm kind of in between where everybody is on here. Like, I was born in 85.
Okay.
So I do remember growing up with the syndication reruns of the episodes. The new toys were still coming out, although at that point, especially in like 90, 91, 92, you're getting into your like Battle Corps, your space stuff, your giant robotic space guy. I think the best way to wrap it up would be Christmas 1992 was the year I got my G.I. Joe headquarters, which was the big playset for that year.
Sure.
And for months, every weekend, I'd be going to Toys R Us, just eyeballing this box. That's it. This box. That's my Christmas gift. That's it. Christmas morning, well, my parents weren't the ones taking me to Toys R Us. My other family members were. So Christmas morning, wake up, I see the box all wrapped up. I'm like, that's the G.I. Joe headquarters. And my parents are just like, oh no. How do you know that? I'm like, I know the box. that is the box.
Right.
Yeah.
And so they forced me to open that last. And sure enough, no, that was 100% the G.I. Joe headquarters.
Nice.
And yeah, so I had a bunch of the figures growing up. Not so much the original lines,
Sure.
obviously, but with the second run of the series through syndication, I was into it.
Excellent. Okay, so I saw the cartoon as a kid. Transformers I recorded off TV. G.I. Joe I did not. I only recorded the first couple miniseries. But about 5 years ago, I bought the box set on DVD.
Nice.
And I rewatched the entire series, including
How
the
many
Cold-
episodes?
Not as many as Transformers, I don't think.
No.
Less than 100.
G.I.
maybe
Joe, I
80.
think,
wow.
is 96.
90, I think it was 98 for Transformers.
98?
And G.I. Joe was maybe 80. I don't know.
It's like 86 or 96 for G.I. Joe. Transformers is just around that 100 mark, like 98 or
something like that. Yeah. But I rewatched them all excellent.
I'm sure.
But
What's your favorite one?
Cold Slither. Cold Slither, the one where Zarcha and the Dreadnoks form a rock band. Anyway,
Cold Slither, you'll be joining us soon.
a band of vipers playing a tune.
I remember that episode.
No, keep going.
No, that's all
Okay.
I got. My favorite episode, for whatever reason, just stuck in my head. Cobra Commander, his big plan for that episode was to use a giant laser to carve his face into the moon.
Into the moon, yes, yes. What about, remember the Viper? I am the Viper. I am the Viper. Somebody keeps calling barbecue and saying, I am the Viper. I am the Viper. I am coming tomorrow. And so they think that, oh my God, Cobra's launching an attack. By the end of the episode, the climax is the entire G.I. Joe team is assembled on the street, like in a suburban house, guarding barbecue's suburban house. And they see a guy coming over like out of the sunset, and he walks up and he stands in front of barbecue and he says, I am the Viper. I have come to vipe your windows. And they look down and it's just a guy who's come to clean their windows, and they just all start laughing and it cuts the credits. That's the episode.
That sounds great.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
So anyway, okay, but we're not here to talk about the cartoon series. We're here to talk about the movie, which is technically the ending of the series, okay? It came out probably a full year after the season 2, I think, ended. About that.
Yeah.
And I remember it premiered, I think it was on a Saturday afternoon, because I watched it with my friend Charles Corcoran, who you remember, right?
Yep.
When we watched it, I taped it off TV. I watched it 100,000 times. Maybe not as many times as Transformers the movie, but almost as much. And to me, it's just as quotable. But I can be objective, and I can say that, okay, This movie's a 10 out of 10. It's a masterpiece. It's perfect. Oh no, we'll talk more about it later. But TJ, I want to know what you thought of this movie.
You know, there's a lot of movies from the 80s that still resonate with me to this day that I've always connected with, that I watch time and time again. Transformers, the movie being one of them. This was the complete opposite.
Okay.
Like, I remember, I think I rented it like once or twice as a kid, and it just did not connect with me at all.
Okay.
Like, it was watching the series and all the Cobra-La stuff just for me came from like left field.
Sure.
And even I went back maybe about 5-6 years ago, revisited this movie, and I'm just like, yeah, this is just weird. And even then, watching it tonight, although in the past subsequent years I know a little bit more about the behind the scenes stuff that went on for the production of this, that fed into why this movie is the way it is. I'm like, well, okay, it makes sense, but it still did not hit like, you know, the same chords as like Transformers would form in the 80s.
Okay. Champ Ian.
Hey.
What's your take on this? Is your first time seeing this movie?
First time, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, really. As far as I can recall, and none of it felt familiar. A couple of quotes sort of jumped out.
Okay, sure. I know which ones you mean.
Yeah, and not because I've seen them before, but because various people in my life have repeated them over and over again. Better than I thought it was going to be.
That's why we're friends, Ian.
It felt longer than it was. It could have wrapped up quite a bit sooner, but I was pleasantly surprised at the plot. And it had an easy to follow through line. I was worried about a third of the way through after we learned about one of the MacGuffins, the broadcast energy transmitter. And we dealt with that for a while, and then we leave to follow Falcon as he goes to Sergeant Slaughter's boot camp.
Yes.
And this other weird, that the Cobra-La, we were there for a while, and we figure out this spore thing they're going to do. But then it all wraps back around. Oh, we need the broadcast energy transmitter.
Yeah, that's right, Ian.
Otherwise, they're going to freeze in space. Like, I was worried for a second. They brought this up. This is more clever than I thought this movie was going to be.
It sure is.
Came back full circle. But then it just was a little bit too go with the shooting and the punching. And it needed time to breathe a little bit in order for me to not be exhausted by the end of it. I actually went and checked the runtime after the film was done. It's like, oh, hour 30?
That was it?
Yeah. Felt like a bit longer than that.
Okay.
Felt like a bit longer than that.
We'll expand on your opinion later. Joshua Mervell, tell us your opinion of G.I. Joe, the movie. First of all, this is the first G.I. Joe cartoon you've ever seen?
Yeah.
Okay.
Pretty much, yeah. First that I can remember.
Okay.
I hated it.
Wow.
Yeah, I thought it was awful. So not only was the plot like unbelievably convoluted and dragged out, but I couldn't understand barely a thing anybody was saying. I don't know. I don't know if it. I think it was the fact that the voice, like the audio for the voices, were so low, and the editing was so quick. For a lot of what they were saying, I was losing half of what they were saying. Like, even the jokes, they didn't play out how they should have, because they're just like screaming the lines, and then we cut immediately. Like, there's no like thought put into how this story is being told or what's happening on screen. Everything is just flashed in your face, and we were like, hurry up, let's go, we got to move on, and we got to get to explosions.
I didn't feel that. It could have been where you were sitting. You were sitting kind of on the side. That's probably it.
Yeah,
anyway,
that's probably
because I laughed at all the jokes, but anyway.
Like, okay, there was a funny joke again that I think didn't properly land because of how it was executed.
Sure. Which one?
One of the new toys essentially was being put through boot camp.
Yeah.
And he has the dog that
Law and Order.
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah, Law and Order. Mm-hmm. And he said something like, the dog goes and sniffs out the bombs,
and I drive
the car. We tried it the other way around, but it didn't work.
Yeah, great joke.
Which is a good joke, but you barely hear it. Like, it said so quickly, and we cut away.
It was rushed. Yeah, it was rushed.
So like it's again kind of a clever little thing, great to introduce this unique character, but then never comes into play ever again. It's just there to sell a toy, and you barely have time to like even read
but
what the character
comes
says.
the dog comes back later.
Sure,
on
he's in the helicopter,
and
but he
he's
doesn't
like,
do
"Oh, no."
anything. Like it doesn't like it doesn't like that's another huge problem I have with this movie is we are introduced again, presumably to sell toys, but we're introduced to like a bunch of new characters and we're introduced to a new group of people and we're like, okay, this is who we're going to follow for the rest of the movie. No, they're sidelined to introduce more characters that are then sidelined again. Like, I'm not sure who we're supposed to be following in this movie. Who's the main character? Like,
I just gotta, I gotta point out one quick thing that you mentioned about the jokes, like cutting too quickly or not being executed well. One thing I noticed about shows that I watched as a little kid and then rewatched as an adult, which are many, like Dungeons and Dragons, that's another good Marvel Productions cartoon, is that jokes that I remember from a kid that I remember dying laughing at, when I rewatched them, they're terribly executed, but it's almost like my brain translated them from my child mind.
Right, yeah.
So it's like when I watch that joke with Law and Order, I laugh, but I can see where you coming in for the first time, it's like not cut right and it's rushed, blah, blah, blah. But maybe because I saw it as a kid, I don't know. My brain translated it. I think that's it.
Yeah.
Now, one more question before we move on. Were you a fan of Transformers, the movie?
yes.
Interesting.
But I also grew up with
Interesting,
Transformers. I also grew up
because-
with Transformers.
Because it has
And-
the same screenwriter.
Okay.
So is it possible...
George Lucas also wrote Star Wars, and then he wrote
but is it-
Phantom Menace. So
Well, but is it possible...
I don't know if that argument's going to work on Mike.
No, but here's
yeah.
the thing. Yeah, you're right. Is it possible it's the equal level of quality writing? It's just that you didn't grow up with it?
it's possible.
I think that's the
I think everything that happens, and maybe it's because the Transformers movie had a theatrical release and presumably had like a high definition version sooner, so they were able to like edit things. But everything to me seems very clear in the Transformers movie, and in this, everything is very weird and convoluted. And
TJ,
like, okay,
I was going to say, what do
Yeah.
you think of his theory? Because this is the same edit. Like, this is the exact same edit I saw in 87. Yeah.
Yeah, like when it was originally released, it was released for TV, was it not?
Yeah,
It was,
when
yeah.
it was
Yeah,
created
okay.
for the theater. To be fair,
well,
created for the theater.
yes.
Transformers came out first,
Yes.
bombed,
Yes.
and they also freaked out because Optimus Prime died and parents got
Wait.
upset. So even though Duke dies in the script, they overdubbed. Oh my God,
He's in a coma."
fallen into a coma. And at the end of the movie, good news, Doc is out of his coma, and that's it. Right? They don't even show
You
him.
don't see him. He's on a...
Yeah. But anyway,
And-
TJ.
But yeah, like the non-success of Transformers the movie played a huge part in what happened with the G.I. Joe movie, where originally I believe it was supposed to have a theatrical release and it didn't, and then it was chopped down to be a 4-episode story for a Saturday morning release. So there had to have been editing involved. There was like the aforementioned Duke dying, not dying stuff. And yeah, it was definitely heavily edited for television because that's where they were putting it out as opposed to a proper theatrical release.
So this movie should have been closer to 2 hours long, is what...
I hope so. Well, let's put. You
it
know what?
felt already like 2 hours.
I would say probably like at least I would say probably another 15 minutes, like
Maybe,
like a good 145, 148 runtime type deal.
There was one moment I could feel that they cut away. You remember when Globulus is fighting Lieutenant Falcon, and I think he stabs his eye, and
Yes.
it cuts away to a wide
Yeah.
shot. That felt like heavily edited, right?
100%.
There was a couple other
You
moments.
you don't see him get stabbed in the
Right.
eye either.
Right, he
And
just
you
screams.
just sort of see the aftermath of it later.
There's so much of this movie that is like you don't see. Like even in that fight, what's his name? Globulus. Globulus is in like
Voiced
this.
by Burgess Meredith.
Yeah.
Is in this like
Penguin.
Yeah.
in this weird like pod. Like he's like half tick or something, and he's like floating around. And then in that fight, I guess he comes out of the tick and he's a snake on the inside. But
Yeah.
they don't like do a good job of like selling that it like opens up and he slithers out. Like I feel like
I thought
it just
they did.
cuts to him being a snake guy.
They should
and then they
him
show
coming
him
out, though.
go back in.
No, they showed him coming out though. They did. I saw it. I've seen it many times.
Okay,
yeah,
well,
yeah.
But only the once though.
Yeah, the only ones.
And
only
right
ones.
at the end.
Yeah, only at the end. To be fair, the toy, he was just a snake, like just a half snake. But in the movie, he gets that pod thing and floats around in it. I don't know why, but...
Is Globulus an existing character?
So, quick story. And I said this before, but I'll say it again. Every year, they would come up with new toys. And Larry Hama's job was to write all the file cards and also incorporate those characters into the comic book. Okay, but this was the first year where he wrote the file cards. In fact, he might not have written the file cards, but he thought of the names, I think. And he said, "I am not going to put these characters in the comic. They're ridiculous. They do not fit." So he refused. But when they were asking him, it was either him or Buzz Dixon, the cartoon writer. They said, "Okay, we need a name for these characters. What do you got?" He goes, "Well, I don't have a name. So for now, just put Cobra-La in the script, and we'll think of a better name later." And then the movie came out, like, oh shit! That's not the Cobra-La. That's not. Oh fuck! They left it in. Okay, fine.
That explains so much.
Yeah, exactly. Cobra-La. Oh, the other thing is that when they were trying to come up with they had this toy for Serpentor. They said, okay, here's our toy. You got to come up with a explanation for how there's this new Cobra Emperor, and I think it was Buzz Dixon who came up with two ideas. He goes, "Okay, I got the good idea and the crazy idea." And the good idea was season 2 of how the actual origin of Serpentor, combining the DNA of world leaders like Genghis Khan and Alexander the Great. That's the good one.
And a snake.
And a snake. No, the bad idea was this. And so the studio said, we're going to use both of them.
Shut
and
up.
Buzz Dixon was like, but they don't go together. We'll worry about that later. So they did season 2 with the first idea, and they did the movie with the second idea. So that's where this comes from.
So this is like a character that comes back later. This wasn't so bad that they dropped it?
No, you're talking about Serpentor or Globulus?
All of it.
No.
Like,
Serpentor became the
Yeah, who are
Cobra.
we talking about right now?
Hold on a sec. Let's back up. So
Globulus, right?
Serpentor became the Cobra Emperor in G.I. Joe season 2. Cobra Commander was the original leader. Serpentor eclipsed him and became the Emperor. The whole thing with Globulus and Cobra-La is only in this movie. It was introduced in this movie.
Well, that's the second idea.
It's tied to Serpentor because remember he says,
Yeah.
Oh,
they sort of explain.
Yeah, they go,
this is what
Dr.
happened in season
Mindbender,
2.
you thought you came up with the idea for Serpentor, but actually it was planted in you by this mind worm or whatever.
I feel like I'm having a stroke.
It was in there.
Basically, they did to Dr. Mindbender what they did to a, oh my God, Chekhov in Wrath of Khan.
Yes,
hey,
exactly.
here's a mind bug. Off you go.
Yeah. So I'm only talking about, Globulus, Pythona, and Nemesis Enforcer, and the whole Cobra-La thing.
Yep.
They were introduced in this movie, and then since this is the last story, you never see them again because there's no more stories. But when this came out, me as a viewer, I did not like the revelation that Cobra Commander is not a normal person. He's a snake man. I hated that.
Yeah.
Because in the comics, he's just a regular guy who's like a pyramid car salesman that becomes this super powerful leader of this terrorist organization. So they kind of ruined it with that. I love the movie, I actually like Cobra-La, but I don't like Cobra-La for G.I. Joe.
Yeah.
Right?
I can see that.
Yeah.
Like the idea of having like a organic, like, I don't want to say like organic militarized type thing, but like an organic society that wants to take over in and of itself is a good sci-fi idea. Tying it into G.I. Joe and specifically Cobra, that's a stretch.
Right.
Especially when you learn that Cobra, this terrorist organization, has existed for millions of years.
I know.
They were the original inhabitants of this planet until the Ice Age came.
I know. It's
a little far-fetched.
Yes. But to be fair, Josh, you can admit it is a very creative idea to have a red carpet made of little red beetles or crabs or whatever, and then flying a ship that's just a flying, like, not like a fish, but it's a weird thing, and then they pull like tendons and it makes it scream, and then a big vagina opens, they fly into it, there's a big clam monster. Like I think those are all cool ideas.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting world. Visually, maybe the one thing in this movie that works, because everything else is just like a strobe light.
Sure.
Like it really just feels like just flashing.
There was 2 scenes with strobe lights, but okay.
There's
Both of those scenes
Come
are like
on.
18 minutes long.
yeah. Okay.
come on.
Yeah.
Act 3. Yep.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know.
Okay, so let's talk
I
about-
can't believe that you guys like.
Oh yeah, we love it. Anyway, so let's talk about. Okay, you know what I think? Let's talk about the actors.
Okay, buddy.
Let's talk about.
Sure. Yeah. Let's talk about the
so
actors.
let's talk about the new characters introduced in this movie and the voice actors that played them. Starting with Don Johnson playing Lieutenant Falcon. Josh, do you know who Don Johnson is?
No.
Oh my God. Don Johnson played Sonny Crockett on Miami Vice.
No, Nash Bridges, man.
I haven't even seen that, but
No?
No.
No, okay, basically 90s Miami Vice, but in San Francisco with Cheech Marin
Okay.
instead of...
I've probably seen
partner.
it, sure.
Yeah, yeah.
He's also Dakota Johnson's father, but who cares about that?
Oh, okay,
cool. But Ian, you're familiar with Don Johnson, right?
I am now.
Wait, you didn't see Miami Vice as a kid?
Not to the point that I've made a connection between
Okay.
this person named Don Johnson.
Okay. Do you guys know what the word cool is? Because it was invented in 1984 by Don Johnson.
Have you met me, Mike?
No.
I don't know what the hell
listen.
cool is.
Don Johnson was the coolest human alive. Okay, you see how this is just a pure coincidence. Do you guys see how I'm dressed right now? This was invented by Don Johnson. A button-down shirt that's unbuttoned with a shirt underneath was invented by Don Johnson. Except that he wore strictly neon colors. Okay, he was the coolest man alive. Anyway, he had a very distinctive raspy, voice. So that was maybe 84ish. This was 87. So he was like top of his game. He would like who'd be the equivalent of Don Johnson today? Would you say, TJ? Like,
God,
who's as cool as him?
There is no equivalent to Don Johnson today.
That's
People
right.
wish there was an equivalent to Don Johnson today.
You're right.
Like
There's no Don
there's
Johnson.
No comparison.
That's true. Okay.
What are we talking about?
Yeah, we're talking. Okay,
Miami Vice.
So, okay, Lieutenant
Voice actors
Falcon.
of G.I.
So,
Joe.
what did you think of Lieutenant Falcon? Josh, I'm looking at you. What did you think of
me. He should have been our main character, but I didn't give a shit about anything he did.
I did. I loved him.
He's a douchebag at the beginning of the movie, and then he's good, I guess, at the end for some reason. I don't understand why.
Because he was trained by Sergeant Slaughter, obviously.
And because his half brother Duke died.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
In a coma.
He was in a coma.
Yeah. His half brother went into a coma. Not his brother died. His half brother went into a coma. So he learned responsibility. He learned
How?
Because he died. Because he went into a coma.
But what did he do to learn responsibility?
He saw his brother go into a coma. What do you mean?
And then he went to Sergeant Slaughter's boot camp.
Yeah, and then he went to Sergeant Slaughter's boot camp.
He had to ring a bell.
He got trained.
No, he didn't ring the bell. It was
No,
some
he
guy.
didn't
No,
ring
that
the
wasn't
bell.
him.
No, that was
didn't ring the bell.
those
He
are
Rod
the main
Big Lobster.
characters.
Because he was cleaning up after breakfast.
Yes.
At that point.
I washed some dishes and watched my...
Yeah, he missed
half
breakfast.
I watched my
So
half brother go into a coma.
So what happened was,
And I'm gonna be more
Lieutenant
like-
Falcon was hitting on Jinx, sexually, assaulting her. And then while he was doing that, Cobra breaks in and then injures 3 members and puts them in the hospital. And he feels guilty about that. That's step 1. He gets...
He doesn't really feel that guilty
Well,
about
he feels
it, though,
guilty later.
because that's what sends him to boot camp.
Yeah, he goes to boot camp. He gets trained by Sergeant Slaughter. He learns teamwork. He learns how to be a part of a team.
No, he doesn't.
Sure he does.
How? What does he do?
Because he gets
Oh, no.
rescued.
He gets
and
rescued
they say,
in the terror
we all
drone."
go home or nobody goes home. Don't you remember?
That's it.
That's it, yes. Okay,
Yeah,
let's
no,
talk
no,
about
no,
Burgess
no,
Meredith.
They were
What's that?
in.
No. Wait,
They hadn't even left it. They were in the same room.
Yeah, no. They
Like-
had left... No, when they
It wasn't
went
a
to-
rescue mission.
Yes, it
He
was.
was standing over
no.
there.
No,
he's on
He's
the
on
other
Wait,
side of the
Josh,
chasm.
Josh,
did you
don't you remember
remember
this?
that movie?
Josh, don't you remember this? Tell us when he's
Oh,
getting
yeah,
slapped
sure.
in the face
And
by
then-
the Emperor of
Because
Cobra.
it's more like,
Sergeant's...
tell
Yeah.
us.
Yeah.
Tell
A
us.
gentle.
Tell us.
Yeah.
And Sergeant Slaughter and the rest of the renegades are outside. They're like, oh, well, where's Falcon? Oh, he's still inside. Well, we're going back. What? No way. No, we all leave or no one leaves.
And
And,
remember-
they all went back in.
Remember there's that weird chasm with the teeth? And
Oh,
then
that was at the end. No,
That's a
that was
callback. That's a
Oh, it was a
callback.
call- oh, sorry.
Yeah, because
Sorry.
because Sergeant Slaughter says it to Red Dog. We all go home, or
Yep.
no one goes home.
Yes.
Then later, Lieutenant Falcon, he learns self-sacrifice. He's on the other side of the chasm, and he's like, "You guys save yourself." And Sergeant Slaughter says, "We all go home, or nobody goes home." And that's the lesson of the film. And then Jinx says,
it, we all
"Grab
go
my
home at the
ankles." And then Sergeant Slaughter swings her around, and then he jumps across and gets rescued. And then that's the end of the movie. So anyway, okay, so let's talk about Burgess Meredith. Does everybody know Burgess Meredith?
The Penguin.
He was awesome. He was so good in this movie. Ian, what do you think of Burgess Meredith?
He was
I thought he was so good.
fine. He was fine.
He was like Leonard Nimoy good. Right? Like,
I
remember
wouldn't-
Leonard
I-
Nimoy was in
Oh
Transformers?
yeah.
Well, I wouldn't go nearly that far, but
No?
he was all right.
I mean,
100% I would.
see, there you
alright.
go.
Dude, better than Orson Welles in Transformers.
Oh,
I mean,
come
yeah.
on. They wheeled him into the recording booth. That's not fair.
Burgess Meredith.
Fine,
You
I
are
guess.
lost, G.I.Joe. Lost. Oh, he's so theatrical. You could see him in the recording booth.
iconic
putting
line.
So much. Okay. You want me to dig out the iconic
Yeah.
lines? Give me a minute. Okay, keep talking. Keep talking.
Right,
There's so
I don't
many.
know.
Yeah, but Josh, if you saw this as a kid, you'd be quoting it just as much as we are. Don't you realize that? Like,
Maybe,
Do you
but-
actually think if you saw Transformers movie right now that you'd love it as much as you did when you saw it as a kid?
No, probably not as much, but I think I think it feels like a movie still. Like this doesn't feel like a movie.
It does to me. It does
I don't
to
know.
me.
Okay.
Lifeline. Lifeline. Remember when Roadblock reunites with Lifeline? That's awesome. Anyway.
With Lifeline, you said?
Yeah, I think it was
Were
Lifeline.
they hanging? Did we see them hang out before that?
Who?
Lifeline and
Well,
Lion
in the
and
other
Roadblock?
98 episodes of the show,
Oh,
but you have
right.
to see those. Okay, we talked about Burgess Meredith. I think that's it for the
Those are
celebrity
good-
voices.
Oh, hold on. We also
Sergeant
have,
Slaughter.
which is my favorite one in the opening credits, is you get, Don Johnson, Meredith Burgess, but then you get Sergeant Slaughter as Sergeant
Yes.
Slaughter. I'm like, yes.
Yes.
That's it, right there.
So many of our young compatriots did not know Sergeant Slaughter was a wrestler in WWF.
Yes.
And then they just took that guy and had him play himself in the G.I. Joe cartoon.
So he actually lost his job in the WWF because of the G.I. Joe deal.
Really?
Yes. So originally, I'm also a wrestling guy. Big surprise. Whoa. Hey now. So Sergeant Slaughter, I believe, started originally in the AWA with the character, and then through the territory takeover that Vince McMahon did, small wrestling history, whatever.
Sure.
We know the whole of this already.
Absorbed a bunch of the companies, built his thing, brought in Sergeant Slaughter. Sergeant Slaughter had this deal with G.I. Joe. Vince McMahon was like, oh, well, no, you can't do this, blah, blah, blah. I'm doing this and this. And he's like, well, they're going to offer me this much money, so no, I'm leaving. Or Vince McMahon dropped his contract, one of the two. Either way, Either way, Sergeant Slaughter left WWF for a few years.
Sure.
And did the G.I. Joe stuff. And then I think it was like 90, 91, he returned to the WWF into a whole nother storyline where
He became big. He became a champion.
He became champion, and they moved locations for WrestleMania that year because of bomb threats, because he was a Iranian sympathizer at the time. Iraqi
yes.
sympathizer.
This
He
is
was-
during the first Iraq invasion.
Yes.
Wow.
He became like an Iraq character.
Yes.
But like, wrestling fans, they kind of took it a little too seriously, and they actually wanted to kill him. Like murder him.
There were bomb
Yeah.
threats and whatnot, and they moved. Although, within the stories, some say it was due to lack of ticket sales for that WrestleMania. Others are saying it was threats to his life, but they had moved locations for that
Sure.
WrestleMania.
Terrorism
But-
or ticket sales, one or the other.
Oh,
can't
a
tell.
little bit of column A, a little bit of column B. Hey. But Sergeant Slaughter is Sergeant Slaughter. Classic.
Yeah, and then he ended up becoming champion, and then I think he lost the belt to Hogan.
Yes.
For Hogan's third reign or whatever it was.
Yeah, I think that would have been like 90, 91.
Right. So we'll just say quickly, the new characters that were introduced in this movie, other than Globulus, Nemesis Enforcer, and Pythona, were the G.I. Joe members introduced were Lieutenant Falcon, who we already talked about, also Jinx, the Japanese ninja, Big Lob, the tall basketball player, Tunnel Rat, who was based on Larry Hama, the comic creator,
Chuckles.
and then Law and Order, and then Chuckles.
Yes.
And then when we did a G.I. Joe review at Fog about 10 years ago, Frank Inchiti accidentally came up. He showed up to the episode dressed like Chuckles. So we just played it off as like part of, it was all part of the plan. He was Chuckles. But anyway, because Chuckles just wears like a Hawaiian shirt.
Yeah.
That's his thing. But Big Lob was never made into a toy. For some reason, he was not a toy.
Couldn't fit into the package. He's too tall.
Yeah, probably. But I personally loved all those new characters. Josh, what did you think of those new characters?
You know what? They were at least interesting and new. And they stood out from all of the other G.I. Joe characters. Again, I'm not familiar with the G.I. Joe characters.
Sure.
But they all look the same to me for the most part. Like
I can tell them apart.
They're just army dudes, you know, like
Can't
like
you know the difference between Lumberjack and Sergeant Slaughter? Here?
Right.
I think
This-
the mustaches are slightly different.
Yeah.
Leatherneck, not lumberjack.
Leatherneck. Yeah.
yeah, he's got a tank top on, he doesn't, and that's about it.
See how different they look down here?
Well, hey, look.
Oh wait,
Again,
this is
that's
a
the
picture.
same picture, but
Take
still.
That's the same picture. They came from the same combo pack.
And you know what? The action figures actually help their case. I think in the cartoon they're drawn way too similarly,
Yeah, maybe.
and that's just like an '80s thing.
Sure.
A lot of like human characters usually look alike.
Yeah.
But they don't give them enough, I think, to distinguish. So when these new characters come in, I'm actually like, these actually feel like unique, new, different characters with different personalities. Their training montages were kind of fun.
Yeah,
and
they
then
were.
they drop them and they don't bring them back.
For an hour.
And when they do bring them back, they hop in a helicopter and crash, and they drop them again. And I don't remember them returning.
Yeah,
because they're not in really the final battle.
No, Jinx
right?
is. Jinx comes
Jinx-
back.
Oh, Jinx
Yeah.
is. Jinx
Yeah.
is. But then I don't know what happened to the other guys.
Yeah,
But so yeah, they're interesting for when they're there. But
Yeah.
unfortunately, they don't add anything to the movie or the story. Sadly, and I think that like putting Falcon in with them would have been way more interesting. Like if Falcon was already established and then he was knocked down to being rookie, and it was about them kind of together learning and like having
Instead
to
of
learn teamwork together,
sending him away to other
you know
characters.
what I mean? Like,
yeah.
yeah. So it just
That's a good point.
yeah.
Okay.
I like them. I wish that they were in the movie more and it was more about them.
I'll just say, okay, go ahead, TJ.
Sorry. I was gonna say like Tunnel Rat did help out in the third act because he was like, there's a little waterway there.
Yeah.
That's how we get in.
Right.
So waterfall. Okay, off we go.
Yeah.
But yeah, then Jinx had her big fight.
Yeah, she was important. Ian, what do you think of these new characters?
I'm gonna agree with a bunch of what Josh said there. I'm gonna go back to like I grew up with a little bit more G.I. Joe than you did, so I can tell Duke and Hawk apart, right? But
Right.
I can see how other people might not be able to, right? Like after a while, a bunch more on the G.I. Joe side, they just end up looking like generic soldiers, right?
Yeah.
Then you look at Cobra and you got like Destro and Cobra Commander and everyone looks a little bit crazy, right?
Sorry, go ahead.
It's easier to tell them apart.
Now, to be fair, the first year G.I. Joe, I think there was 13 figures, all in green. And some of them had the same face, right? Like Grunt had the same face as Grand Slam. Short Fuse had the same face as Flash. With year 2, they started diversifying them. And that's when they brought in Snow Job, all in white. Gung Ho, all in kind of light teal. So they all had a completely different color scheme.
Oh, I know Snake Eyes.
Yeah, black, all black. Yeah.
He's like the pretty defining character.
Yeah.
Actually, as a non-G.I. Joe fan, was he originally a bad guy?
No.
No, that was Storm Shadow.
Why the hell did they name him Snake Eyes and put him on the good guy
It's
team?
a little confusing. I'll give you that. Because even as a little 5-year-old kid, I was like, wait, why is he called Snake Eyes? I know, and I have no answer for that.
Okay.
But I do know that I think if it's revealed in that Netflix documentary, The Toys That Made Us, that they were like, oh, well, I think they just painted him black to save money.
They didn't pay him at all.
Oh, they didn't paint him at all.
Yeah, it was just cast.
That's right.
Molded in black plastic.
And now he's the most, and at least in the comic book, he's the most popular character.
Yeah.
In fact, he got his own movie. Like I love finding out that stuff. I love it. Because he's mute. In the cartoon, he didn't have as big a role, but in the comic, he's by far the most popular character.
Yeah, because actually, you know what? Actually, that kind of reminds me. I've read some G.I. Joe stuff with the Transformer crossovers.
Sure.
And
Okay,
he's
okay.
definitely probably the biggest part.
Right.
In those, for sure.
So, okay, we've talked about the new characters, we've talked about the old characters, we've talked about the plot, we've talked about Duke not dying. I don't know. I guess, okay, let's put it this way. I'm going to go back to my impression of when I saw it as a kid. I'll just say this quickly. I remember thinking, like, I like the fact that they acknowledge as the writers, it's like Serpentor has become the new emperor. Cobra Commander is the old leader, but he's still around. And I like that opening scene when Serpentor is blaming him for everything, and then everyone turns against Cobra Commander. Isn't that cool? Just like showing the politics of the organization.
100%. That is it's a great scene. Is it a way to really open up the movie? Maybe not so much.
Okay.
Maybe lay down a little more foundation for it.
Sure.
Although in the opening credits, you do see the big giant battle at Statue of Liberty where Cobra Commander does place the bomb.
Yeah.
And then the bomb, Duke flies it away and he calls everyone for retreat. So yeah, I can kind of see that coming in. But the opening sequence seemed more like a musical theater entrance than anything
It
else.
wasn't even really a scene. I count that as like the opening credits. It wasn't really a scene,
No, but you could interpret that as opening up for that. Hey, Serpentor going to Cobra Commander and saying, "Hey, you keep on screwing up. This is all on you."
Now, the other thing, as far as the plot goes, and this is the interesting thing about the comic and the cartoon. The comic came out first to sell the toys, and in the comic, the leader of the team was Hawk. Okay, for the first 2 years, Hawk was the leader. Then they made the cartoon, and they were like, okay, well, it's already year 2. And we've got all these new figures we want to introduce. Well, okay, we're not even going to include Grand Slam. And what about this guy, Hawk? Oh, well, it's already been 12 months and his toy is sold out and they're not making a new one. So we're not even going to put him in the cartoon. So then who's the leader? Well, we'll create a new guy. We'll call him Duke. So they created Duke for the cartoon because the Hawk toy was already a year old. That's why they created him. So in the comic, they introduced Duke maybe 2 years in, and Larry Hama had to cram him into the story, but never really got a hold on him. So if you read the comic, Duke is not nearly as prominent as he is in the cartoon. In the cartoon, Hawk was not introduced until year 4, which is season 2. So you're going 4 years as a kid, not ever seeing Hawk, and then all of a sudden he comes in as the leader above Duke, right? Then before that, in between, in the third year, they introduced Flint. And the toy manufacturer said, okay, here's the new leader of G.I. Joe. Kill off Duke, by the way, or get rid of him. And the writers of the cartoon were like, we can't just kill off the most popular character. He's like Optimus Prime. So why don't we just keep Duke as the leader and make Flint second in command? Okay, fine. So in this movie, they introduced Lieutenant Falcon. And he's technically above Duke and Flint, I think.
That is crazy to me. Because he seems like the younger brother who is like the rookie that needs to be trained. So it doesn't.
Well, that's what doesn't make sense. Is they introduce him as Duke's brother, but
Half
he's
brother.
half brother, but he's a lieutenant, and he says in the movie, "I'm going to pull rank. I'm an officer."
That line confused me.
Yes.
because I thought that he was just some
rookie
kid, right?
Yep. I think what the idea is that G.I. Joe is supposed to be the best of every, like the best Marine, the best of the Air Force. So I'm assuming Lieutenant Falcon came from somewhere else in the military because he's already lieutenant.
Air Force.
Huh? Or whatever, Air Force, whatever.
Because he's a Falcon.
Oh, maybe. There's Hawk, there's Falcon, there's Snake Eyes.
Hey, birds of a feather.
Yeah. Okay, so I don't know what else to say. I mean, I'm just gushing about this movie. Ian, do you have anything else to say about this movie?
Not really. Although it's interesting that when I was grabbing my copy of it to bring here, looked at the timestamp of the download. I downloaded this movie in 2010.
How's that possible?
And I haven't
Really?
watched it since.
Really?
I hadn't watched it.
Interesting.
Yeah. Somebody said you should watch it, and I downloaded it.
It was probably a guy named Mike Poirier.
Probably.
And Pogos. Yeah, probably.
You probably insisted I download it, and I did. And then it just sat on my hard drive for 15 years.
Right.
And then that's the exact copy that we watched today.
Wow, that's pretty cool. And this is the Blu-ray?
It's
there a
something.
Blu-ray?
HD?
It's
I have the
HD.
Blu-ray at
Yeah.
home. Yeah.
It's HD.
Don't you dare.
Did Blu-rays?
Josh doesn't know
15 years ago,
that.
did they?
Okay, Transformers the movie I have on VHS, DVD, and Blu-ray. Okay? And recorded off TV. Anyway.
Same. Same. 100. Actually, in high school, I purchased through eBay. I think it was like $180. It was 8 VHS tapes of the entire series
Nice.
in chronological order, with the movie interspersed in there, so it stayed in chronological order.
Nice. Okay, here's a story, 4 seconds long. In late 90s, I get in my car, I cross the border to the US, I drive, not to Detroit, I drove to like Royal Oak. I go into like a record store, I walk in, I buy Transformers the movie on DVD, I pay for it, I walk out, I drive back to Canada. Because the American DVD had Spike say, oh shit.
What are we going to do?
Yes, and the Canadian version was censored, so I had to go to the States to buy the American version. That's how dedicated I was. Anyway, okay,
Dedicated
so
to profanity.
yeah, more like. Anyway, okay, so here's the thing. I obviously love this movie. I put it almost on par with Transformers the movie, and that's all I'm going to say about it. But I do love it, and as Ian knows, this movie was quotable to me because Ian heard quotes from the movie before he saw the movie.
Oh, yes.
Josh,
yes.
what's your final take on this movie?
Maybe it's because I don't have the nostalgia for it, but I feel like this doesn't come close to the Transformers movie. I also feel like there's a reason why like people still talk about the Transformers movie, the Transformers franchise. G.I. Joe's kind of been left behind. I don't know. I feel like it's just not as relevant today, and this movie does not do a great job of setting up the new characters that we're supposed to be following, and doesn't give us enough context for the old characters that are returning and kind of updating us on their stories for somebody who is coming in new. But
Okay.
I don't think this movie is for people that want to watch a movie. I think it's just G.I. Joe fans that are watching this.
So the last ever G.I. Joe story from the 80s is not the place to start, you're saying?
Yeah, probably not.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ian, what do you think?
It was fine. I had to shift mental gears pretty early on and remind myself that this is a toy commercial for children.
Sure.
And it's easier when you're not setting too high a bar for it. It was okay. It had a plot that I could follow, and aside from being a little long at an hour and a half, it had some moments. No, I'm gonna give it a solid C.
Okay.
Solid C.
Solid C.
6
All right.
out of 10.
TJ.
Well, it was definitely a movie, we'll say that. But like knowing what I know about the behind the scenes with the production, because as you brought up about the comparisons to the Transformers, the movie, the fallout of that movie very much had an impact on this movie, moving it from a theatrical release to a TV release, which then affected the editing of it, which affected the story of it. So I would have liked to have, it's probably never going to happen, but to see what they originally really wanted to do with it compared to what we got, those are probably two very different things, considering that they were both working independently of each other. And Transformers did have an influence on it, and even to the point of like even a soundtrack style. If we're going to compare like 80s cartoons movies, Transformers had a great 80s rocking soundtrack.
That's right. Spectre General.
Spectre General, which was also Kick-Axe, which actually found that on vinyl in Chatham like 4 years ago.
Oh, nice.
Yes. And Weird Al, Dare to Be Stupid.
That's right.
White Lion with the theme. And this, you had a decent backing track to it, but nothing that's really standing out. But overall, the not a horrible movie, not the greatest movie,
The fifth greatest movie, in my opinion, but go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, we're not even going to get into that list, but we'll be here for another hour. But no, I would give it like a solid like 6.
Okay.
Knowing what I know, going into it, trying to be objective with it. It wasn't a movie that I gravitated to as a kid.
Sure.
When I'm going to the video store to rent movies, for me, I was going to episodes of Transformers, episodes of G.I. Joe, the Transformers movie, episodes of Mask, as opposed to this.
Sure.
Because like we've already said, Cobra-La had no real anything else going on, and it's just like, what?
Right. Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest takeaway watching this movie is just like, what?
That's your final review?
Yeah, what?
Okay. Well, okay, TJ, if you could have us review one movie on Earth with you on this podcast, what would it be?
Oh, that's a dangerous question. You know what? Let's say Bloodsport.
Okay.
Wasn't expecting that.
Okay, I think it was like Dog
was
Soldiers.
Oh, Dog Soldiers is another one. I was suggesting that one for Halloween. Dog Soldiers is probably one of the best werewolf movies to come out in the past 20 years.
Okay.
Top Gun, and for people that know me, is just a stupid, obvious answer because, well,
Sure.
ridiculous. But yeah, I'd say Bloodsport
Okay.
at this point.
So possibly look for a Bloodsport review coming your way in the near future.
Will that fit either of the podcasts?
Not at all,
Or will we
no.
need to
Okay,
make a
what if
third
we
start a new
podcast?
podcast?
What about The Warriors?
The Warriors. Oh, that's a good movie. That's a solid movie.
yeah.
Yeah, we'll figure it out. One of those we'll slot in at one point, definitely. Okay, we want to thank TJ for guesting after being
thank
a
you.
regular at Meteor for.
It's been about just over a year now.
There you go.
About
That's
a year
it?
now?
I feel like
Yeah.
you've been here the whole time.
Yeah, it feels like. I couldn't
Yeah.
imagine a Uniplex without TJ.
Neither could I. Neither could I.
Definitely. So thank you for joining us. Champ Ian, thank you for hosting every week.
Anytime.
All right. Every Wednesday. Sometimes you move it to a Tuesday or a Thursday. Usually on Wednesday, though.
Usually.
Awesome. And Josh, you can tell everybody where you can find our episodes.
You can find all of our stuff over on our website at thecomicbooksyndicate.com. You can also find the video format versions on our YouTube channel, so check us out there. Let us know what you guys think about G.I. Joe, the movie.
Until the next time,
Yo, Joe!